One of my favorite books that I've read in the last decade is the book Team of Teams. And up next is Dave Silverman, who is one of the co-authors. He is founder and CEO of CrossLead. Dave spent 13 years as a Navy SEAL, leaving as a lieutenant commander, having received 3 Bronze Stars and other commendations. Later, Dave worked with his colleagues to codify and write down some of their amazing lessons learned to future leaders as part of that journey. Dave co-founded the McChrystal Group, where he served as their CEO for 5 years. In the London conference in June, he described the incredible story of why, in 2004, the Joint Special Forces Task Force in Iraq was failing to achieve their mission to dismantle al-Qaeda in Iraq and what they did about it. Their work led to not only them achieving their strategic objectives, but also led to a deep and critical rethinking of almost everything across all U.S. military services and in commercial industry as well. He will be co-presenting this time with his colleague Jessica Reif, who is Director of Research and Development, where she researches and codifies practices into the CrossLead management framework. She currently leads their education efforts, which has been delivered to over 20,000 leaders. I am so delighted. Like so many of us, she comes from a software background. She was previously Product Delivery Manager for Applied Machine Learning and Engineering at Oracle Data Cloud, where she had to solve the Team of Teams challenges in a software development and delivery context. I've asked them to present today on more of the learnings and the principles and practices in Team of Teams, especially the practices relevant to this community. Regardless of your opinions on that war, I know you'll appreciate the impact that their new ways of thinking and operating has done for this community. For those of you who didn't see their June presentation, we will be making it available in the video library for you to watch. Here's Dave and Jessica.
Thanks, Gene. My name is David Silverman, and I'm the CEO and founder of CrossLead.
And I'm Jess Reif, and today we're here to talk about leading in complex environments. We're super excited to be here at the DevOps Enterprise Summit.
So our story begins with me starting out with SEAL training back in 1998, where I went to what's called Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. In the August of 1998, I classed up with 165 other men from really around the U.S. And over the course of the next 7 months, we went through some pretty arduous training with a combination of cold water, heavy logs, big surf, and an opportunity to select out at any given time. Our class went from 165 down to 19 original graduates in February of 1999. And after SEAL training, every young frogman then starts to actually learn how to do the mission. So first you go learn how to jump out of airplanes. And in my case, I got to go to sniper school. And then overseas, you find yourself deployed in support of counterterrorism missions around the globe with your unit, which is really the pinnacle of what you think about as being a leader in the special operations community. And when you get home, there's oftentimes a moment of reflection where you get a chance to think about and process what's happened. And me and a group of buddies got together and we wrote a book called Team of Teams that captured this remarkable experience of transforming the special operations community over the course of about a 10-year period. So to understand the background on the special operations and the U.S. counterterrorism apparatus, it's important to go back in time to the late 1980s. And out of the failed hostage rescue attempt, the United States put together Joint Special Operations Command. And Joint Special Operations Command aggregated the top special operations units from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and brought them together to basically identify tactics, techniques, and procedures to respond to terrorist threats around the globe. Its classified mission was to be a standing joint task force in support of the President of the United States and the National Security Council, along with 19 other government organizations, to respond to threats wherever they emerge in the environment. You can see here on this slide, there's 5 different organizations that were critical to that mission set: the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, and the Department of State. And very quickly in the early 80s and 90s, this organization became world-class and had a lot of success operating around the globe. But it was also very tribal and siloed, meaning every organization had its own background, had its own approval process, had its own promotion and incentive process. And these cultural differences, not just in the military, but they are also across the interagency, were pretty significant. And while we learned how to be incredibly efficient and operate, this would become a fundamental design flaw as we tried to figure out how to combat a very different enemy. Al-Qaeda also was born around the same time as the special operations community. In the 1980s, it found its legs fighting against the Soviets in Afghanistan. And then after that conflict, it most of the people that served there went back into their respective countries and started to metastasize into this larger global threat. In this case, more than 47 different countries had some representations of Al-Qaeda by 2001. And, it operated very differently than the way we expected most terrorist organizations to operate. First and foremost, we thought it looked like and operated like an organization similar to ourselves, right? We wanted to basically apply our own heuristics to how it was designed. And the original strategy coming out of 9/11 was called a decapitation strategy, where if we could identify the top 2 leaders, Zawahiri and bin Laden, and the 7 core lieutenants, and we can remove them from the battlefield, the thesis was we would remove the organization as a meaningful threat. But the reality was it looked very differently and operated very differently than a traditional hierarchical organization. It transcended cultural and geographic lines that were traditionally norms that would constrain most terrorist threats. And it looked like this very adaptive, highly networked organization that was leveraging a variety of technologies that was emerging into the marketplace in the early 2000s. These social and digital and mobile capability sets allowed this organization to fundamentally make decisions and communicate and collaborate in ways that previously were unimaginable, which fundamentally shifted the power from what was a very consistent bureaucratic organization where we were being outflanked and outmaneuvered by this highly nimble, agile force that was Al-Qaeda. And by 2003, we realized we needed to do something different. Now, how we were operating traditionally was called a counterterrorism operating model, which was called the F3EA methodology. This operating process was really designed in the early 20th century in the interests of the U.S. law enforcement trying to combat against mafia organizations. And the basic thesis was you'd find out who your adversary was, you'd fix their location in space and time, you would send in some type of finishing force